I am a jealous god, and there is no other god beside me. That's Yaldabaoth, the lion-faced demiurge, from the Apocryphon of John, a Gnostic text found in the Egyptian desert after 1600 years. The line is a boast. He claims to be the only god. But saying it that way suggests to the angels someone else might exist, since you wouldn't insist if it were obvious. His boast gave him away. 1600 years pass. A buried codex emerges. At a podium, a man completes Virgil's sentence. The oldest Western prophecy is simple. Kronos learns his son will overthrow him. He eats his children as they're born. That's the engine. Fear of being replaced. Saturn devours because someone warned him that his own creation would destroy him. Saturn is silent. Saturn is patient. Saturn is hidden. What you are about to watch is what happens when the oldest archetype in Western myth possesses a vessel temperamentally wrong for it. To understand this, picture a perfect Saturnian vessel, invisible, its devouring mistaken for governance, its binding resembling law, its golden age echoing policy. This one is in neon. The Golden Age is Saturn's age. It's that way in every classical source we have. Hesiod works and days. The first race of mortals lived under Kronos, like gods, free from toil and grief. The fruitful earth bore them fruit abundantly and without stint. Virgil eclogues, 6 centuries later, I am redit et Virgo, redeunt Saturnia regna. Now the Virgin returns, now Saturn's kingdoms return. Ovid, around the same time, Aurea prima sata est aetas. The Golden Age was first created. Now look at a dollar bill, flip it over. Under the unfinished pyramid, you'll find the words Novus Ordo Seclorum, a new order of the ages. The phrase comes straight out of the same Virgilian eclogue that declares Saturn's kingdom's return. Charles Thomson designed the seal in 1782, and he named the source himself. So the founding fathers, on purpose, picked a text about Saturn's return as the inscription on the currency of the Republic. Every American handles the prophecy daily in their wallet, without ever knowing they're holding it. Whether the Golden Age was meant as a myth is unclear and not important. The idea works below conscious thought. The word golden carries a meaning built up since Hesiod. When a leader says the Golden Age has returned, he is finishing a thought that began with Virgil and appears on our currency. Saturn's first gesture is renaming the world. The geographic past is restored by fiat. The Saturnian promise is always retrospective. It exists only in looking backward. Saturn devours his own children. This is the defining image of the archetype. Goya's painting, the open-moored father consuming the young. The myth says he ate them out of fear. Kronos already had all the power. He swallowed each newborn because he had been told that one of them would do to him what he had done to his own father, Uranos, overthrow him. The most powerful figure in the cosmos, Lord of the Golden Age, and every act of devouring is an act of terror. If Saturn's devouring is fear-driven, then the question becomes, what is the prophecy he is trying to prevent? The most powerful figure of the early second term was not a cabinet member. It was the world's richest man, the head of the Department of Government Efficiency. 6 months later, he had been devoured by the apparatus that elevated him, in Trump's own sentence. The pattern is the systematic destruction of people whom Trump himself elevated. He erases the value of the relationship retroactively. I barely knew him. He was never any good. I gave him everything, and he was ungrateful. This is the Kronos gesture. The father who gave life claims the right to take it. The gift was never free. Loyalty was always the price. What Saturn demands is total submission to his time, his frame, his reality. And the moment a child reflects something back that is not the father's own face, the child is consumed. The fixer who could not protect the patron is devoured. This is older than Trump. This is the archetype's structural function. Alchemy made gold one thing and lead another. Gold belonged to the sun, lead belonged to Saturn. The great work was the slow business of getting from one to the other, and the alchemists spent centuries warning each other about the way it goes wrong. They called it aurum sophisticum, false gold. You coat the lead and you haven't changed it, you've hidden it. The base metal's still under there doing what base metal does, and the second somebody leans on the surface, the gilding scratches off. Looks like gold, still is lead. Jung, in Psychology and Alchemy, treats the whole thing as a psychological pattern, inflation without transformation. The ego claiming solar consciousness, wholeness, illumination, while never going through the nigredo, the blackening, the decomposition of the old self that has to come first. So the gold is stolen instead of earned. A monarch's banqueting hall, financed by corporate vassals, built by demolishing the building that Jackie Kennedy preserved. Gold-coated air, exchanged for retail money. The gilded surface, the base substance underneath, and the people holding the bag when the difference is revealed. Every product in the Trump commercial empire wraps a base offering in gold branding. Trump steaks, Trump vodka, Trump University, Trump water, Trump Bible, Trump sneakers, Trump watches, Trump NFTs, Trump crypto token. The pattern is consistent. A commodity product, gilded with the name, sold at inflated prices. The gold is on the surface. The substance underneath does not match. The alchemists had a name for that. They warned about it for 1,000 years. Saturn does not only devour, Saturn devours and then sells what is left. Alchemists describe the market governed by false gold. Gilded base metals sold as real gold is simple fraud, but deeper fraud comes through systems. Goods made from destruction, wars to create trade, ruin repackaged as profit, and fake gold sold at scale. This is what distinguishes the second term from the first. A monarch's banqueting hall financed by corporate vassals. A foreign monarchy's jet refitted in the king's livery. A meme coin built around the king's name, retaining 80% of its supply for the king's own companies, while 800,000 strangers lose $2 billion learning what the price discovery felt like. Old gestures, fresh paint. Renaissance princes took tribute from anyone passing through their territory. Medieval indulgence merchants sold dead strangers' souls back to the families who'd loved them, charging by the year off purgatory. Nothing here is new. Hiding it was the part everyone used to bother with. In 2022, 6 months after leaving the first term, the Saudi Public Investment Fund placed $2 billion with the son-in-law's new firm. The Saudi Advisory Committee that screened the investment had warned against it on grounds of diligence. The committee was overruled. The $2 billion sits with the family. The same family. The son-in-law of the building at 666, the son-in-law whose name appears on the inheritance chain of every Trump-adjacent foreign deal of the last 7 years. Spoken in February 2024. 28,000 have been counted dead in the rubble already. The casualty count would more than double over the next 2 years. The prophecy would be operationalized on a stage in Switzerland with a deck. While the war was still being fought and the bodies were still being counted, the president posted an animation of the bombed strip, reimagined as a resort he would build. Gold statues of himself among the ruins, the dead unpictured. The Saturnalia of the redevelopment pitch was turned into a state communication, posted from the official account on the platform the president owns. This is the operational mode. Catastrophe becomes inventory, and inventory has to be replenished. The apparatus needs the catastrophe the way other businesses need supply, and over time, the supply problem solves itself, as these things do, by producing more of what it needs. Take shame out, and the whole chain runs. Shame is the brake. A person who has it stops where everyone else stops, which is most of the work of staying inside a society. Take the brake off, and the first crossing outrages people. The second time, less. By the 10th time, the outrage isn't there to enforce anything, and the line is wherever the shameless person felt like putting it that morning. That's how shame works as a limit, and that's how its absence works as a scaling mechanism. Saturn had no shame because his survival, the prophecy told him, depended on swallowing his own children, and you don't apologize for that. You do it again at the next birth. The apparatus inherits the same logic at a larger scale. Different size, same trick. The shamelessness isn't a personality defect. It's an operating instruction passed down from the oldest prophecy in Western myth. And the freshest example is 1 week old at the time of recording. Read against the calendar of the same season, the timing is not subtle. November 2025, the bipartisan Epstein Files Transparency Act passes. The president signs it, publicly reluctant. December through March, tranche releases of Epstein-adjacent files. The president's name appears across the released material. April 2nd, the Attorney General is fired over the mishandling of the Epstein files. April 27th, the president on 60 Minutes accused of pedophilia in a stranger's manifesto, volunteers Epstein's name unprompted in his denial. May 8th, the renamed Department of War opens Pursue and begins releasing UAP files on a months-long rolling schedule. There is an old American word for what this is, applied to a single con, grift, applied to a continuous one, racket, applied at the scale of a state, empire. The apparatus that produces the catastrophe is the apparatus that profits from rebuilding it. The apparatus that floods the news cycle with mystery from beyond the sky is the apparatus that needs the cycle flooded. The catastrophe is the product. The mystery is the cover. The shamelessness is the operational condition. The audience is being trained. Every line crossed moves the line below it. Selling office access openly redefines the office before anyone votes on the redefinition. Profiting openly from the bombing redefines the bombing the same way. And in the middle of the worst exposure cycle of the presidency, the renamed War Department picks the same week to open a public UFO portal scheduled to drip files for a year, which redefines disclosure too. None of these were debated. You're watching the redefinitions arrive in the order they were always going to. Wherever you see the gold, that's the sign. This part of the world is now for sale. The Saturnalicious Princeps, the Lord of Misrule. Pick a low-status person at the Roman Saturnalia, hand him the king's robes, and let him rule for the week of the festival. He'd issue absurd decrees from a throne nobody respected, preside over the inversion feasts, and at the end of the festival he'd be removed, sometimes killed. Then normal hierarchy came back. The Apprentice was Trump's Saturnalia, the carnival stage, where the tabloid figure played the part of a business titan. Jonathan Braun, who supervised editing on the show, told Patrick Radden Keefe in 2019 for The New Yorker, "Most of us knew he was a fake. He had just gone through I don't know how many bankruptcies, but we made him out to be the most important person in the world. It was like making the court jester the king." But Saturnalia is supposed to end. The slave returns to slavery. The carnival dissolves. Normal hierarchy reasserts itself. Trump's career is a Saturnalia that forgot to end. The court jester now broadcasts QAnon mysticism from the throne, accepts a foreign monarch's jet under the Constitution's nose, and posts AI images of himself as Pope from the official White House account. The aesthetic of an emperor receiving an emperor, a president of the United States standing on a tarmac applauding the head of state of the country invading the country his predecessor was arming. No deal. The applause, the tarmac, the B-2 flyover, the cameras, then the flight home. January 6, 2021 was the most literal Saturnalia in American political history. People in costume on the floor of the Capitol. A man in a horned headdress sitting where the vice president was supposed to be. The crowd outside chanting "Hang Mike Pence" on the steps. The mock kingship festival trying not to end this time. It failed. The mock king left office. The chains came. The earlier Saturnalia were retroactively absolved by executive fiat on the first day of the second term. The mock king's festival was recanonized as state policy. Back to Hesiod. In the Theogony, Zeus overthrows Kronos, and the Titans get bound in Tartarus with chains of bronze and shoved into the deepest pit under the earth, where the 100-handed ones stand watch over them. The same father who'd been devouring his children, the Lord of the Golden Age, ends up down there with the rest of them. The ruler becomes a prisoner of the sun he was trying to prevent. Virgil picks up the same image centuries later. In the Aeneid, Saturn arrives in Latium as a fugitive, fleeing Jupiter's overthrow. The word Virgil uses for him is vinctus, bound, even in exile. Even in the land where he's about to establish the Golden Age all over again, he's still carrying the chains. Between March 2023 and August 2023, Donald Trump picked up indictments in 4 separate criminal proceedings, 91 felony counts altogether, more than any former president had ever faced. On May 30th, 2024, a Manhattan jury found him guilty on all 34 counts in the business records case, making him the first former president convicted of a crime. Then, on January 10th, 2025, 10 days before his second inauguration, the judge handed down the sentence: unconditional discharge, no prison time, nothing on probation, no fine. The conviction sits on the record. Nothing follows from it. The chains are symbolic. 2 months earlier, in August, the Wall Street Journal reported that the Trump family's crypto venture had a partnership with a Binance-operated trading platform. The pardoned man was the man whose company underwrites the family's crypto business. The most legally bound president in American history, won re-election while under indictment, was convicted of 34 felonies and assumed the presidency with the conviction on his record and the sentence amounting to nothing. Saturn is bound in chains, but the chains dissolve. The Titan walks free, retakes the throne, and declares the Golden Age returned. The structural inversion. Kronos was bound after losing power. Trump was bound during his pursuit of power, and the binding itself became the instrument of his return. Each indictment energized his base. Each mugshot became merchandise. The Georgia booking photo from Fulton County Jail in August 2023 became the most reproduced political image of the 2024 cycle. The chains were not chains. They were campaign material. Saturn devoured his own imprisonment. The unconditional discharge is the most Saturnian detail, a conviction with no punishment. The justice system pronounced the defendant guilty and imposed no punishment. A conviction that binds nothing, restricts nothing, costs nothing. Kronos in Tartarus, if Tartarus had no walls. Saturn rules time. This is his most fundamental domain across every tradition. Kronos was conflated with Chronos, time itself as early as the pre-Socratic period. The scythe of the harvest god became the scythe of time. Father Time in Western iconography is Saturn, the old man with the blade, counting the hours, delivering decay. To be Saturnian is to be bound to time. To resist Saturn is to attempt the impossible, to fold time backward, to undo what has been done, to return to a moment that has passed. The Department of War. That was the name from 1789 to 1947. Saturn loops the name backward by social post. The renaming of mountains, the renaming of gulfs, the renaming of the federal workforce, the renaming of the cabinet department, the undoing of museum exhibits, the undoing of 78 executive orders in one signature, the reinstatement of programs that the predecessor revoked, the end of a 33-year arms control consensus as seen in a Truth Social post. All of it is one gesture. Time, run backward. The Saturnian fantasy is that you can rewind the tape, undo the decay, and keep the next generation from arriving by reinstating the one before it. Kronos devours because he was told his own child would destroy him. Everything else is downstream. In 100 days, NPR audited more than 100 targets, including individuals and institutions reached through ICE arrests, criminal investigations, firings, executive orders, or revoked clearances. News organizations, universities, international students, law firms. The Kronos engine. Name the threat publicly, set the apparatus on it, dissolve the structures that could protect it. The devouring of allies is the fear of replacement. Any figure elevated to prominence could become the one who overthrows. The clearance revocations are preemptive, in fear of the figures already replaced. The Cheney Tribunal's message is fear of figures who have already crossed the line. The 18 inspectors general are afraid of any institution that could later say no. The Schedule F order is a fear of every civil servant who might refuse a future directive. Same gesture every time. The most powerful figure in the cosmos is afraid one of his own kids is going to take him down. Take all of him at once, and you get one composite figure. The peacebringer who ordered an unsanctioned strike on Iran with 7 B-2 bombers in the middle of the night. The same man, weeks later, stood on a tarmac applauding the head of state of the country, invading the country his predecessor had been arming. The defender of American sovereignty wants Greenland and Canada and the Panama Canal, in that order, sometimes phrased as a joke and sometimes phrased as policy. The 24-hour negotiator who's been negotiating Ukraine for over a year now, watching round after round of brokered iterations stall out. The closest thing to a genuine deliverable is the only one in which Trump's strategic interest aligned with the regional powers' interest in stopping a war that had become a political liability for all parties involved. Even there, the deeper phases remain uncertain. Saturn promises peace and brings war. Saturn promises war and brings peace. The promise is the surface. The substance underneath is whatever fear is operating at the moment. Saturn devours his own children. This is the defining image of the archetype. Trump and Jeffrey Epstein. Here's the record in order. October 2002, Landon Thomas Jr., writing in New York Magazine. Trump on the page, his own words. I've known Jeff for 15 years. Terrific guy. He's a lot of fun to be with. It is even said that he likes beautiful women as much as I do, and many of them are on the younger side. That's 2002. Photos from earlier than that, photos from later, all the way into the 2000s. Flight logs put Trump on Epstein's plane at least once. Then, somewhere in the mid-2000s, Trump banned Epstein from Mar-a-Lago. There is no clear date on the ban. In 2019, Epstein was arrested, and Trump's version shifts. I knew him like everybody in Palm Beach knew him. I had a falling out with him. I was not a fan of his. Same speaker, 17 years later. Different story. Epstein's victims were overwhelmingly minors. The operation on Little St. James involved the systematic trafficking and abuse of underage girls. He died in his cell on August 10, 2019. The fixer who could not contain the files is devoured. The files themselves do not become public. The list is not on the desk. The investigation closes. The cabinet member is gone. The same month, on the same network, a 60 Minutes correspondent named Nora O'Donnell read to Trump from the manifesto of a suspect who had named administration officials as targets. The manifesto called the president in writing a pedophile, rapist, and traitor. She asks his reaction. She did not say the name. He did. Asked to respond to a stranger's accusation of pedophilia, the first name the President of the United States reached for was the name of the convicted trafficker he had been photographed with through the 1990s and the early 2000s. He brought the name up to deflect it. He named the network to deny membership in it. This is the Yaldabaoth gesture from the cold open. I am a jealous God, and there is no other God beside me. By making the declaration, the speaker revealed what he was trying to obscure. The boast was the proof of his ignorance. The denial is proof of what it denies, because the denier names the thing he is trying to displace. Saturn devours his children. This is the most literal contemporary enactment of the archetype. Powerful older men consuming the youth, bodies, and futures of children. Trump has not been charged with any crime related to Epstein's trafficking operation. He is not Epstein. He is not Combs. But the network in which the relationships existed is the same network. The consumption of innocence happened in the circles. The denial is retroactive, and when the denial is asked for in front of the cameras, the name the denier reaches for is the man at the center of the network. The cabinet member who could not protect the files was consumed when the files would not stay buried. And the same week, on the same network where the cabinet member's failure was being broadcast, the man at the top of the apparatus pronounced the buried name himself. And the youngest devouring is not metaphorical. January 22, 2026. Davos, the World Economic Forum. The signing ceremony of the administration's Board of Peace Charter, the apparatus designated to govern post-war Gaza. Tony Blair on the board. Mark Rowan of Apollo Global Management is on the board. Marco Rubio on the board. Steve Witkoff is on the board. No Palestinians on the board. The son-in-law took the stage to present the deck. The Gaza Health Ministry death toll the day Kushner took the stage, approximately 71,000. A figure that the Israel Defense Forces accepted as its own working estimate 1 week later. February 2024. A sentence: move the people out and then clean it up. 1 year later, February 2025, the same sentence comes back as an animated post from the official account, the strip drawn as a beach resort with gold statues of the speaker standing among the ruins. 11 months after that, in January 2026, the same idea returns again as a signed charter and a slide deck presented from the Davos stage. 3 years. First sentence to operationalized rendering. 71,000 counted dead in the rubble outside the slide. This is what Saturn eating children looks like when the eaters draw the after. What you've just watched is the function, the structural logic of what Trump does, the grooves the archetype cuts. But an archetype has a manner as well as a function, a temperament, a way of carrying itself. And Saturn's manner is the part of the archetype that has always been hardest for a human being to play. In every tradition, Saturn waits. Kronos sits with his children inside him for a full generation before Zeus is even born. The whole strategy is stillness. The astrologers gave him the slow planet, the long orbit, the seventh sphere, the god who governs by withdrawing further than anyone else can follow. He's the monk, the hermit at the edge of the page. Saturn is silent. 99 minutes, the longest joint session address in 61 years. On tape, the sitting President of the United States cites a fictional cannibal as a wonderful man at the annual congressional fundraising dinner. The same year, he lectures the European Commission about the migratory patterns of birds, addresses the McDonald's Impact Summit about a pilot's exclamation, and announces on camera that nobody knows what magnets are. The President of the United States. In 2025, none of this is the manner of Saturn. The manner of Saturn is the cell at the edge of the monastery. Saturn rules time. He's the scythe that comes for everyone eventually, and the whole point of being Saturnian is the patience to let time do that work. The man whose script attacks vulnerability dozes on camera. The man who insisted he would live to 200 wanders off mid-walk. The body that declared the golden age sags in plain view. Saturn rules time, the slow stripping away of vitality, the scythe that comes for everyone eventually. Trump's entire aesthetic is organized against that. The hair, the skin tone, the health letters, none of it natural, none of it accurate, and the good genes story is the kind of story you tell when you cannot bear to be inside the body that is aging. This is the one place where the figure refuses what the archetype asks. Saturn rules the visible decay of the body in old age, and every other axis of Saturn lines up with this man, but the body axis doesn't, so he paints over the body. He has doctors write letters denying what the cameras already captured. When the cameras catch something he can't deny, he restages the moment at the next rally as proof he's stronger than the people doubting him, and the room cheers, and the doubt gets reframed as the enemy's slander. The narrative beats the body. For a while. April 2025, the Walter Reed Physical declares him in excellent cognitive and physical health. 3 months later, chronic venous insufficiency. The ankles had been visibly swollen at the FIFA Club World Cup 4 days before the diagnosis, in front of every camera in the stadium. Then a bruise on the right hand, photographed bare at one event and concealed under foundation at the next. 8 months after the diagnosis, patches on the back of the neck during a broadcast, named out loud by 2 dermatologists watching from home because no one in the press would say it. The body keeps the record. The letters about good genes don't. The spray tan is the aurum sophisticum of the body. False gold over an aging surface. Time does what time does and the orange comes off in the shower. Saturn is the outermost visible planet, the slowest, the dimmest, the one who governs from beyond the sphere of the seen. In planetary astrology, he rules the boundary itself, the last gate, the threshold, the figure who operates from the edge of awareness, rather than the center of attention. A real Saturnian figure wouldn't need any of this. No gold trim, no parades, no AI coronation images posted from official state accounts. He wouldn't need to be seen at all, because Saturn in the old reading is the figure who governs from the edge while the room runs itself. The apparatus moves for him. He doesn't have to be visible for the apparatus to do its work. He's the one no one's watching, which is exactly why nothing can stop him. The terror of being seen as small is the terror of being overthrown. He's patient because he has all the time in the world, silent because he has nothing to prove, hidden because the apparatus moves on his behalf and doesn't need his face on it. Trump's apparatus only moves when he's performing somewhere. The performance is the engine that runs it. Strip out the rallies, the Truth Social feed, the AI images, the parades, the gold trim, and the man left over is the one whose hands keep bruising and whose head drops mid-meeting with the camera still running. Saturn is patient, Trump is impulsive. Saturn is silent and Trump is loud. Saturn is hidden and Trump is on every screen. Saturn is cold and Trump is hot. Saturn is the monk in the desert cell at the edge of the page. Trump is the rally, the spray tan, the gold-plated remote control. The vessel is wrong. There are 3 honest readings of this break, and the first one is the easiest to make. An observer with a mythological lens can map any sufficiently complex public figure onto any sufficiently rich archetype. Saturn's myth is vast enough that some nodes will always seem to fit. The previous sections selected the evidence that fits and ignored the evidence that does not. This reading says the dossier is interesting but proves nothing. The reading deserves serious weight. It is the Steelman of the skeptic. And we will leave space for it to remain in your mind when this is over. Saturn's function, the devouring, the binding, the time ruling, the material governance, the golden age, the fear of overthrow, is one layer. Saturn's manner, the patience, the withdrawal, the asceticism, the silence, the cold deliberation, is another. A human vessel can enact the function while violating the manner. The function is what the archetype does through the person. The manner is the person's own temperament. When an archetype possesses a structurally incompatible personality, the result is a distorted Saturn. The archetype's logic is driving a Martian body. The devouring still happens, but it's noisy. The binding still happens, but it's chaotic. The golden age is promised in the register of a carnival barker. This reading says the break is the most interesting thing about the pattern. A disciplined Saturn, patient and silent, would walk straight through the archetype and nobody would notice. The devouring would read as governance, the binding as the law working, the golden age promise as the next budget cycle. Trump's manner is what makes the archetype show up under the lights. The archetype wants quiet, and he's loud. It wants patience, and he's impulsive. It wants hiddenness, and he's on every screen. So every Saturnian act gets performed in neon, and the neon is what lets you see the act at all. The vessel is wrong. The wrongness is the visibility. A perfect Saturnian vessel would be invisible. An imperfect one is a spectacle. A 4th reading, darker than the first 3. The calendar of the last 6 months has given it more substance than was honest to put on the table when this essay started. The chains in Act 1 came undone. Conviction without a sentence on it. Federal cases withdrawn after the election. Civil judgment still sitting on paper while the Titan walks the floor of the East Room declaring the Golden Age open. This reading says the chains never broke. The chains were renegotiated. The binding moved from the legal apparatus to a quieter set of constraints, and the cost of meeting those constraints has been transferred outward to whoever was cheapest to make pay. The Bondi files wouldn't stay buried. The Attorney General was fired in April. 11 days after the 60 Minutes manifesto exchange, the renamed Department of War opened a public UFO portal, scheduled to release files monthly through next year. Iran was struck in June by 7 B-2 bombers, with no congressional vote. Gaza was posted to Truth Social as an animated beach resort, while bodies were still being recovered from the rubble. The ballroom went up on the demolition of the East Wing. The Memecoin kept 80% of its supply for the office it was named after, and the price of a seat at the president's table was published on a public ledger. Each of these can be read on its own. Each is a documented event with documented actors. This reading says there's also a payment schedule. Survival outside Tartarus has a price, and the apparatus pays it by charging whoever's cheapest to make pay. The news cycle was washed away by the spectacle, the war that needed no congressional vote, the file release that consumes the bandwidth where Epstein would otherwise live. The bombed strip was rendered as the resort that the apparatus would build. The binding wasn't broken, it was renegotiated. Saturn didn't escape Tartarus. He made Tartarus open its gates by agreeing to bring tribute on a calendar. And spectacle is what the audience is watching. Which may be why half the country sees the pattern and the other half doesn't. One half is watching the function, what Trump does. The other is watching the manner, how he does it. Same man, two layers, and the country can't agree on what it's looking at. Before the convergence, a transit, 2,000 years long. Start with the words. Saturn and Satan are two names that sound like cousins in English. They aren't. Saturn's Latin, Saturnus, is probably tied to Satus, the word for sowing, or maybe to an Etruscan name, Satra. Satan's Hebrew ha-Satan, and all that word means is the adversary, the accuser. They only sound the same to us because we speak English. The real overlap is functional, and that one wasn't a coincidence. That one took 2,000 years to build. 2,000 years of theological and astrological syncretism, where the planetary gods slowly collapsed into the demonic adversary, an inch at a time. In the book of Job, Satan is not a demon. He is a member of the divine court, the Bein Elohim, the sons of God, functioning as a prosecuting attorney. He tests Job's righteousness with God's explicit permission. He accuses, he strips away, he imposes suffering as a diagnostic instrument. This is Saturn's function in planetary astrology, the tester, the limiter, the one who strips away what is not essential. Ha-Satan in Job is doing Saturn's work under a different name. The Roman historian Tacitus, writing in the early 2nd century, named the chain directly. In the Histories, Book 5, Chapter 4, he records that the Jewish people observed their 7th day of rest. Because of the 7 stars that govern the affairs of men, Saturn moves in the highest orbit and possesses the greatest power. The Romans did not invent the connection, they recognized it. The 7th day was already named after Saturn in every Western language. Saturday, dies Saturni, Sabbato, Samedi, Shabbat. The planet of the highest power and the day of rest of the people whose hidden god was the god of the heights, called by the same Saturnine name in the calendar of every empire that touched the Mediterranean. 8 centuries after Tacitus in 9th century Baghdad, outside the Christian world entirely, the Persian Muslim astrologer Abu Mashar al-Balkhi kept the same identification on the record. In his Introductorium Maius, Saturn is the star of Israel. The chain had survived the fall of Rome, the rise of Islam, and the codification of Christian doctrine, and emerged in a Baghdad astrology textbook still intact. The Gnostics push it further. In the Valentinian and Sethian schools of the 2nd and 3rd centuries, the material world has a creator who is not the supreme god. He's a lower god, ignorant or malicious depending on which text you're reading, mistaking himself for the only god there is. The Apocryphon of John calls him Yaldabaoth, the lion-faced one, the same figure who opened this essay with the same boast. The Gnostics mapped the 7 archons to the 7 classical planets. Saturn, as the outermost visible planet, governs the highest and therefore most imprisoning sphere of material reality. The archon of Saturn's sphere is the boundary keeper, the last gate a soul must pass through to escape the material prison. The Christianizing of Rome between the 4th and 6th centuries did the next stage of the work. Planetary gods got recast as demons one by one, and Saturn's portfolio mapped over without much resistance. Time, death, the scythe, Saturday, lead, the color black, the swallowing of children. All of it slid into the demonology cleanly because Christianity had nowhere else to put it. The medieval grimoire tradition kept the chain going. The 11th century Picatrix and Agrippa's 3 books of occult philosophy in 1533 preserved Saturn's planetary intelligence under the names Agil and Zazel, figures that could be invoked for power, but were known to break the people who reached for them without preparing. Agrippa treats Saturn as the most powerful and most dangerous planetary force, neither good nor evil intrinsically, but overwhelming to anyone who invokes it without preparation. One more layer, the Sabbatean heresy, 1665. A Kabbalist out of Smyrna named Sabbatai Zevi declares himself the Messiah. His name has Sabbat baked into it, cognate with Saturn's day, and his movement taught this: the Messiah must descend into sin to redeem the sparks trapped in the kelipot, the shells of impurity. So when Zevi gets pressured by the Ottomans and converts to Islam in 1666, his followers don't flinch. They reinterpret his apostasy as the deepest act of redemption there is. The Holy King goes down into the realm of the Sitra Akra, the other side, the demonic, to bring back whatever's stuck there. Hold that structure. A morally compromised figure performing a sacred function through his own impurity. You've heard this one before. It's the Cyrus framing, the imperfect vessel, base metal carrying the gold inside it. And one more anchor in the record before this thread closes. 6 years old at the time of this recording, and on the permanent transcript of the United States government. December 11th, 2019. White House Hanukkah reception, East Room. The President of the United States welcomed the conservative commentator Mark Levin onto the dais to say a few words. Levin began with this sentence. The President's response on the official transcript: "Thank you, Mark, fantastic guy. Thank you, Mark." No correction. The designation is accepted into the permanent record by the absence of a disclaimer. 3 centuries of Sabbatean radical redemption theology, the Cyrus framing carried through 10 years of evangelical politics, the medieval pattern of the Holy King, descending into impurity to recover what is trapped there. All of it surfaces at a state event, is pronounced into a microphone by a major commentator, and is accepted by the speaker as a compliment. The first Jewish president of the United States, and if he isn't, he should be. To laughter, to applause, into the transcript. The Saturn to Satan pipeline is a slow-motion theological collapse spanning 2 millennia. Job's adversary becomes the Gnostic demiurge, the planetary demon, and the devil. Each stage preserves Saturn's function, testing, limiting, binding, ruling the material, while stripping it of neutrality and loading it with moral evil. The transit is what closes the loop. 2,000 years of theological collapse poured into a single archetype, and the same archetype now structures the public persona on every screen, the tester stripping away what gets in his way, the father devouring the children he raised, the ruler who has mistaken his piece of the material world for the totality of it. Before the astrology, before the politics, before the mythological parallels, there was a cold father. Fred Christ Trump, real estate empire of middle-class housing in Brooklyn and Queens, custom-made suit and red tie daily. Changed the family's described heritage from German to Swedish to avoid offending Jewish tenants during and after the Nazi era. Image management was structural from the start. Fred's parenting philosophy, documented across multiple biographies. The world divides into killers and losers. Kindness is weakness. He told his sons, particularly Donald, to compete, win, and be a killer. To be a Trump is to be a king. You succeed in every possible way. You brook no criticism. You brook no defeat. Mary L. Trump, clinical psychologist and Fred's granddaughter, describes Fred as a high-functioning sociopath who systematically impaired Donald's emotional development. When Donald was 13, Fred sent him to the New York Military Academy. The father's solution to the son's disorder was exile. The small loan of $1 million was at least $60.7 million in loans, per the October 2018 New York Times investigation by David Barstow, Suzanne Craig, and Russ Buettner. Trump received the equivalent of $413 million in today's dollars from his father's real estate empire through loans, loan guarantees, and what the Times characterized as dubious tax schemes, including instances of outright fraud. The gold came from the father. The narrative that it came from the self is the gilding. The first instance of aurum sophisticum in the biography. After Fred's death, his will was contested. In retaliation, Donald, Marianne, and Robert moved to cut off medical coverage through a Trump family health plan to Fred III's infant son, William, who had cerebral palsy. Trump told Heidi Evans of the New York Daily News in December 2000, "Why should we give him medical coverage?" The medical care of a child with cerebral palsy was used as leverage in a will dispute. Kronos devoured his children. Fred devoured Donald's emotional capacity. Donald, in turn, devoured the medical security of a disabled infant in his own family to win a financial dispute. The devouring reproduces itself across generations. This is how an archetype installs in a vessel. October 1973. The Department of Justice files a civil rights lawsuit against Fred C. Trump, Donald Trump, and Trump management for systemic violations of the Fair Housing Act across 39 buildings containing over 14,000 apartments. Coded applications marked applicants of color with C to flag them for rejection. Donald Trump, age 27, met Roy Cohn at Le Club, a members-only Manhattan disco on East 55th Street, that same year. Cohn's credentials: chief counsel to Senator Joseph McCarthy, prosecutor in the Rosenberg trial. The Senate found Cohn had engaged in unduly persistent or aggressive efforts. 3 rules came out of Cohn, repeated across every biographer who's written about him. 1. Attack, attack, attack. Always counterattack with greater force than received. 2. Admit nothing, deny everything. Contrition is weakness. 3. Claim victory regardless of outcome and never admit defeat. The mentorship lasted 13 years. Cohn referred to Trump as his best friend. Trump phoned Cohn 15 to 20 times a day. What Cohn transmitted was the conversion of Fred's emotional code into a public methodology. Fred taught the binary: killers and losers, devour or be devoured. Cohn provided the grammar: how to devour in the courtroom, in the press, in the room where no one is recording, how to use the legal system as a weapon, how to make perception override reality. Cohn got disbarred in 1986. Unethical conduct, misappropriation of client funds, and the worst one, trying to defraud a dying client by getting him to sign a will amendment. He'd been diagnosed with AIDS 2 years earlier in 1984 and denied it the whole way. On 60 Minutes, March 1986, he looked at Mike Wallace and said, "I'll tell you categorically, I do not have AIDS." He insisted he had liver cancer. He died August 2, 1986, less than 2 months after he was disbarred. Trump dropped Cohn while he was dying. At a Mar-a-Lago dinner the family threw as a farewell, Trump later said this out loud: "I had to spend a fortune to fumigate all the dishes and silverware." The man who called Cohn his closest advisor for 13 years fumigated the plates. In March 2017, less than 2 months into his first presidency, frustrated by Attorney General Jeff Sessions' recusal from the Russia investigation, Trump asked White House officials, "Where's my Roy Cohn?" Saturn discovered that devoured things do not come back. Every behavior you've watched in the second term traces back through Cohn to those 3 rules: the devouring of allies, the victory claim regardless of outcome, the gilded surface over base substance, the denial of observable reality, the weaponization of law as intimidation. Fred installed the operating system. Cohn wrote the applications that run on it. The archetype found its vessel through a cold father and a disbarred attorney, and the vessel made it visible to 100 million viewers a night. Kronos devours because somebody told him his own child would destroy him. That's the whole thing. Everything else flows from there. Start with a cold father. He teaches the son the world has killers and losers in it, and nothing else, and the prophecy gets wired in at the level of the nervous system. Stop devouring and you're devoured. Then a fixer arrives who can translate the father's emotional grammar into something usable in a courtroom and on a stage. The son comes out of both of them and builds a life that lands on every node of the archetype. He was born during a total lunar eclipse. The natal Saturn falls at 23 Cancer in detriment, conjunct Venus in the 11th house. The career pivots line up on his Saturn returns. 1975, then 2005. The third one is coming, 2034. Gold over everything, ally after ally elevated and then consumed the moment one of them stopped reflecting his face back unchanged. a building numbered 666 purchased by the son-in-law, then renumbered to 660 the year the family had to let it go. A trafficking network at his back in the photo archive, and the retroactive denials growing more careful each year. Chains from the court that bound nothing, an unconditional discharge handed down by the only judge who ever convicted him. The oldest political promise in Western civilization, the Golden Age has returned, delivered in the exact Virgilian register the founders inscribed on the currency. And underneath it, the refusal to age, because if time advances, the next generation arrives, and if the next generation arrives, the prophecy comes true. And the fixer, consumed when he broke, called for again 30 years later from the most powerful office on earth. "Where's my Roy Cohn?" is the sound Saturn makes when it discovers that devoured things do not return. And behind all of it, the 2,000-year genealogy that collapsed Saturn into Satan, the tester of Job, the Gnostic archon of the outermost sphere, the planetary demon, the adversary. The archetype that accumulated around the adversary across 2 millennia is the same archetype that structures what Trump does in the world. And the engine of that archetype from its oldest source is fear. The convergence is not proof of any metaphysical claim. Trump did not plan his natal chart. He did not write the fourth eclogue. He did not choose the date of the East Wing demolition, the bunker buster strike day, or the cabinet meeting when his head dropped on camera. But he picked the gold himself. He picked the devouring of his own people, the mock kingship he tried to make permanent, the rhetoric of restoration, the open refusal to submit to time. Every cabinet member he later consumed was a person he had personally elevated. The 78 rescissions on day one, the inspectors general fired, the clearances pulled, the parade, the ballroom built on the demolition of the East Wing, the pardons signed for the people closest to him. Every one of those was his signature on the page. And every one of his choices landed precisely inside the grooves the archetype had already carved into place. The same grooves his father dug into him first as a child, that Cohn sharpened into legal weapons across 13 years of mentorship, that Kronos cut into the cosmos the night Earth and Heaven told him about the son who'd take his throne. The question this essay leaves is not about Trump. The archetype is older than the man. The archetype was operating in the Egyptian desert, in Hesiod's text, and in the Sabbatean court before any of his ancestors learned the alphabet. The man activated the archetype. The archetype did not need the man. The same archetype runs in every life where someone is afraid of being replaced. A parent who can't bear that the child has grown taller. The founder who refuses to hand the company to the successor. Any system whose first response to disagreement is calling it betrayal. Any promise that the past can be reassembled and the next generation kept from arriving. None of it needs Trump to function. He's one shape this thing took. There are others. What is the prophecy you're trying to prevent? Something you raised is about to outgrow you. Maybe it already has. What are you going to do about it when it does? What gold have you put on a surface you still won't look at underneath? And what part of your life are you holding still on purpose? Because if it moves, you're not the one in charge of it anymore. Saturn isn't somewhere in Washington. He's the place inside any of us where at some point, somebody taught us that the world divides into killers and losers and warned us that if we ever stopped devouring, we would be the ones who got devoured. The man on the platform completed Virgil's sentence and the founder's inscription. Both were also always about us. The dollar bill carries the prophecy in plain sight in your wallet every day. The Golden Age was never a country. It's the place in any life where time was supposed to have stopped and never did. The question that begins everything is the one Kronos was asked first by Earth and starry heaven in Hesiod's poem. The question is whether one of his children will overthrow him. The answer in every version of the myth is yes.